So I saw this book in a secondhand shop and I couldn't help myself. I know I am years too late to this. I know this ship has long since sailed, but today I am here to read a Colleen Hoover book with the sole intention of mocking it. This is a mean, bad faith, hateful reading of Verity by Colleen Hoover. One of, I think, two thrillers that she's written. She's mostly a romance writer. You know who fucking Colleen Hoover is. I did look up the other thriller, but it's kind of like really cop heavy and you're just never going to get me interested in like a detective story. So instead, I'm reading Verity, which is a book that I know a lot about. Kind of unusually for me. I like to go in with no spoilers, but I have seen the incredible Sean McCombs video on Verity probably like 4 or 5 times. So do I know everything that happens in this book? Absolutely, I do. And honestly, you should go watch that video instead of this one because it's definitely going to be more funny and more entertaining. It's a great video. I know everything about this book. I'm not reading it for the ridiculous plot twists that happen in here. I'm reading it to enjoy the writing, which one chapter in, I can already tell is going to be incredible. So Verity opens with a dedication in an unnecessary, horrifically unreadable fake handwriting font that thanks her author friend for accepting the darkness in people, which is incredible to me. That's an awesome way to start this book. What the hell does Colleen Hoover think her inner darkness is? Men fighting demons, but the demons are bisexuality. Maybe actually, her inner darkness is insane over-the-top gore, because that's what the book proper starts with. It's crazy. This book opens with the main character named Lowen being splattered with the blood and brains of a man who steps in front of a car and gets hit by it, and then his head gets run over, and I'm not joking, it says, popped like a cork. She's covered in like a lot of blood. Basically, no one on the street of seemingly hundreds of people reacts to this at all because, according to Colleen Hoover, who lived in Texas at the time of writing this, which was not surprising to me that she did not live in New York, according to her, all New Yorkers are this, like, callous, indifferent entity. Like, they're essentially monsters. If people are paying attention to this man who has just been beheaded on the street, it's because they're filming it. But mostly everybody just walks by and they don't care. I don't think that's accurate. Lowen says, if I was still living in Virginia, this would be a completely different scene. People would stop, people would panic, they would be screaming, a news crew would be on the scene immediately. But in Manhattan, nobody bats an eye. This kind of thing happens so often, it's just an inconvenience for everyone. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that that is true. I don't think there is any group of people that is like geographically defined in the world who so frequently witnesses like sudden traumatic events, like literally people just randomly dying in a gruesome way beside them, that they no longer react to it. I don't think that's true. I don't think that happens. Also reading that, I kind of doubted that there was going to be this much of a difference in pedestrian deaths in Virginia and New York. And I looked it up and I found a random table, Colleen Hoover. And on that random table that I found on that random website, it says that Virginia ranks 1 above New York in terms of most fatalities of pedestrians each year. So chew on that. Lowen says that the indifference is shocking, but it's also the reason that she moved to New York. In a city like this, the state of her life is irrelevant. No one cares about her, except the random man on the street who leads her by pressing on the small of her back, literally a stranger, disgusting, into a coffee shop to clean up the blood. He takes her right into the men's bathroom and locks the door. And she's like, who is this mysterious, handsome man? Though when she first gets in there, she's mostly focused on trying to get the blood out of her shirt because she has an important meeting. He's just standing in the corner, like brutally watching her. And while she's scrubbing the blood off of her face and out of her shirt, she's thinking, wow, this smell really reminds me of when I was 10, which I think is fucking awesome. I love a shitty thriller that cannot maintain your attention other than through keeping secrets from you. Like, it's like, you really want to know what happened when she was 10, and you're going to keep reading only because of that. I love that because it always blows it up so massive. And it means that when the reveal finally comes, it's either nothing, like it's absolutely meaningless, it does not live up to this thing that it has built itself up to be, or it does live up to it. And it ends up being so insane and ridiculous. And either way, that is thrilling. So he is kind of just standing there watching her undress, watching her think about that time she was 10 where she smelled blood for the first time. I don't really know. And Colleen Hoover here cannot help but be a romance writer. She is a romance writer. She writes, here, the man says, fingering the last button on his crisp white shirt. First of all, fingering? Put this on. He's already removed his suit jacket, which is now hanging from the doorknob. He frees himself of his button-up shirt, revealing a white undershirt beneath it. He's muscular, taller than me. His shirt will swallow me. Is this really the frame of mind that this woman, who has just probably witnessed the most traumatic thing that has ever happened to her, is this really the frame of mind she'd be in? Is she really going to be thinking, oh my God, I'm so tiny, his shirt is going to swallow me up? Come on. I highly doubt that part of Lowen's character is going to be some like really intense hypersexuality used as a coping mechanism, but if it is, I'll eat my words. Lowen is kind of like, well, shit, I can't wear this massive men's shirt swallowing my tiny little frame into this important meeting that I have to go to. But she has no other choice, so she puts it on anyway. She looks at herself in the mirror and she sees that her eyes, witnessing this horror, have turned from hazel to a deep dark brown, which is so good. Brought me right back to reading the shittiest fan fiction ever written on Wattpad. Like, is this man Harry Styles? Actually? Is that who he's going to be? The answer is no. His name is Jeremy. Jeremy is handsome, but in a way that seems inconvenient to him. He's gloomy. He's mysterious. She can somehow tell just by looking at him, wants to disappear into this city just like her. And when she asks if he's okay, he says, I'm fine. I've seen worse, unfortunately, which is such a crazy response. She says, are you a doctor? And he's like, no, I work in real estate. And then truly 2 paragraphs later, she's thinking, I wonder what he meant when he said that he's seen worse. He said he worked in real estate, as if we didn't just read that. Literally less than a page ago. You don't need to tell me again. It's truly like 2 of the 7 sentences that he said to you so far. Why are you repeating them? She gets herself really curious, so she asks him what this terrible thing he's seen is. And he says, you really want to know? As if he wasn't digging for her to ask. And she says, yes, I do. And he tells her, 5 months ago, I pulled my 8-year-old daughter out of a lake. Which I do kind of love. I kind of love when someone is punished for their morbid curiosity, because she's like, oh, I thought this was going to be like kind of fun and interesting, and now I just feel shitty like we're talking about your dead daughter. And then he asks, what about you? Presumably asking what the most traumatic thing she's ever seen is, though she has not indicated that she's ever seen anything worse than a man's head literally exploding in front of her and onto her randomly on the street. But she responds and she says, my mother died last week. And he doesn't really react to this, and she's like, oh, it's because my thing wasn't as bad as his thing. He won. What are we talking about? He asks her how her mom died because this is the most tactless conversation that has ever happened. And she tells him it was cancer and that she took care of her mom for months before she died. And this is the first time she's left the house in weeks, which doesn't quite make sense to me. I feel like she said her mom died 1 week ago. And I just kind of think there would be things that you would have to deal with after your mom's death that would involve you leaving your apartment. Like, getting the body out, but maybe not. I could be wrong there. He doesn't really say anything to that, and the two of them kind of just like part ways after this very intimate experience that they've just had. She's literally wearing his shirt. He has an important meeting to go to, though. She's thinking, I kind of want to go for coffee with him, but then she sees a wedding ring on his finger, and she's like, actually, never mind, I'm getting out of here. She goes back outside, she gives a statement to the police, and then she heads to her meeting with Corey, who is presumably like her literary agent. She's meeting with him and an editor at a publishing press. She's heading over there and her hands are shaking and she's thinking coffee would help, but morphine would be even better. And then it just hammers that home for like 3 more sentences. It says, morphine would definitely help, but hospice removed it all from my apartment last week when they came to retrieve their equipment after my mother passed. It's a shame I was too shaken to remember to hide it. I could really use some right about now. And I think like if you're going to try this darkly humorous thing, you can't linger on it that much. Then it just becomes dark and the humor becomes absurd and it's kind of silly in the end. I don't know, that is a nitpick, but I really feel like those last 2 sentences needed to be removed, especially considering that's like the end of the chapter and it's supposed to be like some sort of punchy moment. And that is kind of indicative of the writing in general. It's not great. You know it's not going to be great. It is very repetitive. It feels like she has no way of driving a point home other than like repeating it and just rephrasing it slightly or using italics in a kind of meaningless way that I think sometimes is meant to separate like her thoughts or like her most inner deep feelings from the narrative voice, but it's not consistent enough to actually make sense. There was also this sign of things to come, which is at the very beginning, first 2 pages, she used in a matter of seconds twice. And I thought, you kind of have to think that the most edited part of a book is probably the very beginning. I don't really know the process, but like surely that's the point where you really have to make sure that you're editing the book. hopefully it would be the whole thing. But if one part's going to be better, it's probably the beginning. And so to have In a Matter of Seconds come up twice within like 3 paragraphs does not bode well. And then there's also like exactly the corny lines that you would expect her to write. Like, most people come to New York to be discovered. The rest of us come here to hide. Which is like so funny. I love it. I fucking love this book. The ideas about New Yorkers in this are insane to me. To be fair, a Canadian. I know that New York has a very strong group identity. I just cannot believe the characterization of all New Yorkers as monsters, as like horrible, indifferent people. I don't believe that that's true. I don't want to believe that that's true. And I feel like the representation of New Yorkers here goes so far in its inaccurate stereotyping that it's almost positioning them as inhuman in their callousness and their indifference. I'm not updating you far enough into this book to really say anything else. It's like 10, 11 pages, 1 chapter. All I can say is that I'm thrilled. I'm so excited. This is fucking awesome. I've been reading some really dense stuff lately, and I needed some dog shit, and I am getting it. I will update you soon. I'm going to go read more. I am now 100 pages into Verity by Colleen Hoover, and this is just getting better as it goes along. This is ostensibly a thriller, and I have yet to feel a single moment of tension or surprise. Chapter 2 opens with Lowen thinking about the night before when her agent texted her about this meeting and how she was sitting there alone in her apartment looking at an ant. And she was thinking to herself how ants usually travel in an army, but this one, he's a loner. I have probably seen 8,000 lone ants in my lifetime, and never once did I think, he's a solitary ant, just like me. It is so terrible and so forced. Do ants even usually travel with an army? I know they're social creatures, but like, I've seen more single ants than ants with other ants. What? She's annoyed when she gets this text from Corey because she had told him after they had stopped having sex that the most appropriate form of communication between an agent and his client is through email, and he didn't listen to that. She doesn't respond to his text even though he's telling her that they have a meeting at 9 the next morning. Instead, she thinks about the ant. She thinks, maybe he was like me and had an aversion to other ants. It's hard to say why I have such a deeply crippling aversion to other humans. Why are we repeating the same word twice in 2 sentences? It's so clunky. It does this so many times. She thinks that the reason she has an aversion to other humans is because of her mother, who was afraid of what she was capable of doing during her sleepwalking episodes and kind of isolated her from other people because of it. Yet another hint of something ridiculous to come with Lowen's backstory that I actually don't remember how it ends up materializing. So in the present moment, Lowen is standing in the lobby of this building, hoping that this offer is going to be enough to catch her up on rent, when someone behind her says, "Nice shirt." And she turns around, and who is it but Jeremy? Jeremy's wearing a new shirt, and she's like, "Where'd you get the shirt? You just carry that around in your pocket?" And he's like, no, my hotel's just down the road. And she thinks, thank God he's staying in a hotel. That probably means that he doesn't work here, and if he does work here, he's probably not in publishing, so this meeting isn't going to be with him. There is no reason as to why she wouldn't want this meeting to be with him. The two of them don't know each other. This is a thing that I noticed in the one other romance book that I read that was a really shitty romance book. And I'm not generalizing all romance, but I am kind of generalizing really shitty romance. And that is like trying to establish a tropey dynamic, like will they, won't they kind of thing, without actually having any understanding of your character's motivations. Because there is no reason for Lowen to be like, I really hope he doesn't work here. Oh my God. She doesn't know this man. The whole reason is so that it's not like a love at first sight kind of thing, or like maybe it's supposed to be building some sort of like sexual tension with Lowen denying that she actually likes him. It's stupid, though. It does become clear pretty quickly that the two of them are headed to the same meeting. He's kind of like flirting with her in the elevator, and then he realizes that it might be a little bit inappropriate considering the gruesome scene that they just witnessed together to be like joking and smiling. So he cuts it out. And then he walks away, and she meets up with her agent. And she's thinking, this is really suspicious. It's really weird that we just, like, coincidentally ran into each other on the street, and now we're headed to the same meeting. Okay. You have no reason to be suspicious of that. You're headed to the same meeting. Of course you're going to be on the street together. I also think here, really, that Colleen Hoover is just trying to write a character that isn't like really irritatingly naive. And so she's making her wary of everything without actually like incorporating that into her character. Because having watched Sean's video, I know that the things that Lowen is wary of are things that are going to be validated by the narrative. And because this wary nature isn't integrated into her character in any other way, it just reads as the book warning the audience of what's to come. So she's getting all suspicious, but then she's thinking, even though I'm a bit suspicious, I can't help but like the guy. He literally gave me the shirt off his back, so I doubt he has a vindictive nature. But like, what? What does Colleen Hoover think that word means? Why would she ever think he has a vindictive nature? Where did that even come from? It's like when Donald Trump said, I did not have a series of mini strokes, and everybody was like, nobody was saying you had a series of mini strokes. It's literally just such a random descriptor for her to throw in. Oh, he's probably not vindictive. Why would you think he would be? What? I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Does that word have a meaning that I don't know? Her agent asks her how her mother is doing, and she gets to see the look of shock on his face when she says that she died last week because this guy, even though they dated for 6 months and had sex for 2 years after that, never asked her how she was doing after her mom's cancer diagnosis. He asks if she's okay, and she says what she thinks he wants to hear, that it was expected, so she'll be okay. What she's really thinking is that it was a relief. He tells her that the lawyer at this agency that he works for can help her with the will, but she says that she doesn't need it because her mom left her nothing. She had signed a lease for a 2-bedroom apartment when her mom got sick because her mom was adamant that she needed to die in her own room surrounded by her own stuff. And her agent, he said, you can't afford a 2-bedroom lease in New York City. But her mom said, don't worry, once I die, I'll leave you a bunch of money and it will take care of all the finances here. And then she died and she had no money. Not only is the betrayal of this and the anger that would come with that insanely glazed over, because this is, I think, going to reveal something about Lowen's mom later in the book, but so is the insanity of that story. Her mom lived with her for 9 months and didn't help with the finances ever once, and she just continued to believe that when she died, everything was going to be okay. How stupid is she? You're telling me that this woman who is suspicious of Jeremy for absolutely no reason was not ever suspicious of her mom, a woman who, it's very clear in the writing, she didn't like very much. Anyway, Corey tells her that they couldn't do this meeting over the phone like Lowen prefers to do because the two of them need to sign non-disclosure agreements before they can get any more information about what this is about. And then 3 people enter the room: an editor, a lawyer, and Jeremy. And Jeremy is introduced here as Jeremy Crawford, and I don't want to out myself as an absolute fucking dork, but that name does mean something different to me. That name made me do a double take. The whole meeting, she can't stop staring at him, and she's like, I have no idea why I can't stop staring at this man. Like, why am I so drawn to this handsome stranger? And it's driving me nuts. Again, this feels like the thing I was just complaining about with trying to establish a specific like romance dynamic without actually ever developing any characterization or interior for your narrator. The editor tells them that one of their authors is incapacitated and they want Lowen to write the remaining 3 books in her best-selling series. Lowen asks who the author is, and this editor, who has had this very professional tone throughout this meeting, says, I think you're well aware of her. Verity Crawford? That seems wildly unprofessional. I know it's trying to tell us, hey, Verity Crawford is a really, really famous author. You didn't need to do it like that. It makes no sense. Anyway, fucking Lowen, the stupidest woman on the planet, is like, wait, Jeremy's last name was Crawford too. They offer her $75,000 per book and tell her that she would need to do press tours as the co-author. She rejects it because she's too shy and people averse, and then Jeremy says, can I speak with you privately? He says they're lowballing you, ask for $500,000 and say that you're writing under a pen name and you won't do any press. She's like, why do you want me to do this so bad? And he says the reason is open-ended. She goes, when I hear him mention the name of my first book, a shiver runs down my spine, or something stupid like that. This is annoying because all this is doing is telling us that open-ended is the name of her first book, but we already know that from like literally 3 pages ago. It does not trust us at all to remember anything about this book because it is so stupid and so forgettable. I also think this is a really weird way to phrase this, saying like a shiver runs down my spine when he mentions one of the books I've written. It doesn't really make sense because he's not like mentioning it. It is the whole and complete answer that he gives. He says that Verity was a big fan of her work, which is one thing that she is not suspicious of at all. Even though she's a starving artist, nobody reads her fucking books. She's not successful. To convince her to take this deal, he gives her a little woe is me story, which to be fair, he does deserve. He says that Verity called them chronics, which means people who have chronic bad luck. So far, this has not come back up in the book. I don't understand why she felt the need to like create a concept or like name a concept for this when you could have just said, we have really bad luck? It's like capitalized, capital C chronic. I think even fucking italicized, because everything in this goddamn book is italicized. I just really do feel like she could have explained that without naming it, because she had to explain it anyway, because that's a name that she made up. He tells her that both of their daughters died within 6 months of each other, twin daughters. And then Verity got in a car wreck, and now she's in a really bad state. But no one will be all that clear with Lowen about the exact state Verity is in, and she's really stupid about it. She cannot read between the lines at all here. For some reason, she thinks here with no evidence that Jeremy asked to speak to her because he wanted to be alone, and she's flattered that being in a room with her is the same to him as being alone. They don't know each other at all. She also has absolutely no reason to believe that this might be true. I think that this is something that Colleen Hoover just thought was romantic, which, to be fair, it kind of is. She just, like, shoved it into the story without making it work in any way, because Jeremy doesn't even say, like, I wanted to be alone. That could have at least supported this theory of Lowen's a little bit, but instead, she just has the thought, and then it's true. She has no reason to think this about him, and yet is so confident, and even if it was true, he has no reason to feel that way with her. They don't know each other. They've spent maybe, 20 minutes together? It very sharply turns into the current moment where Corey is standing at her door holding in his hand the eviction notice that has been pasted to it. He's here to celebrate the deal that they just struck for $500,000 with a little bit of champagne. He comes into the house and he immediately starts undressing. If you remember, the two of them were literary agent and client with benefits, but she broke it off with him when she saw on social media that he was dating another woman who obviously didn't know about her. That was over 9 months ago. And yet as he's taking off his clothes, she says, "How's Becca doing?" referring to his girlfriend. And he is so shocked that she knows anything about this. As if over the last 9 months, she never mentioned to him the reason why she stopped having sex with him, and he never inquired about it. Now he's like, wait, you know about Becca? She tells Corey that, yeah, maybe she's being evicted, but it's fine because she's going to go stay at the Crawford's place in Vermont so that she can work through Verity's notes in her office. And then after a couple days there, she's just going to stay in a hotel until she gets her advance and she can move into another apartment. Corey says, why don't you just get him to mail you the stuff from Verity's office? And she says, well, Verity has more than a years worth of stuff in there. That, I've looked it up, is maybe a phrasing that people use. That is not something I have ever heard in my life. A years worth of stuff? I digress. Corey says he feels weird about Lowen going to stay at their place because he's unsure about this Jeremy character who had 2 daughters die and then a wife get into a car accident. But he's like, I don't know enough about their deaths to really say he's at fault for this. I think that if Verity Crawford was this famous author, so famous that in a meeting her team was like, we think you know who she is, there would be, news stories about her 2 daughters dying and then her getting in a car accident. They are trying to hide the extent of her injuries. That's why they're hiring Lowen. That does make sense. The other things, I don't know. I feel like I would know if Stephen King had 2 children die within 6 months of each other, wouldn't I? Maybe not. And anyway, there are articles online about this, and Lowen has found them. She learned that Chasten, the first daughter who died at a sleepover 15 miles away. Jeremy wasn't there. She had an allergic reaction to peanuts. And then Harper, the other one, kind of a better name, but wow, there are some names in this book. Sorry, Lowen, Verity, Chasten, Harper, and then their son is named Crew. Anyway, Harper, the second daughter, she died in the pond at their house, and Jeremy was at work when it happened. He didn't even get home until they were pulling her body out of the lake, so it couldn't be him. He couldn't have done anything. I don't know why everyone is so fucking suspicious of this man. Then Corey says, well, what about Verity's car accident? There were no skid marks on the road, meaning she didn't break, meaning she either fell asleep or had a medical emergency or she did it on purpose. Verity's like, can you blame her? Look what has happened to her life. So Corey drops it, and chapter 4, or wherever we're at now, is Lowen driving to the Crawford's house, and she's listening to the audiobook of the first book in this already 6-book series that she is writing the next 3 books for. She has no idea about anything in this series. She listens to it and she's like, damn, she's a really good author. She's starting to feel some imposter syndrome. She's thinking, can I pull this off? She's thinking about how she's not the kind of author who's ever been happy with her work. Not like these other authors who get up on social media and post things like, this is the best book since the last book I wrote. You should read it. She, instead, will say things like, It's an okay book. There are words in it. Read it if you want, which is such a forced attempt at relatability. It hurts like in my bones. Like I feel tired beyond my years reading this book. She's annoying. She's just an annoying person. Does she even enjoy writing? I don't understand why she's a writer. She has not found any success. She seems to hate the art, the process. I don't get it. She's worried about failing Verity, this big shot author, who she has never read any works by, just knows of her. But she's unsure if Verity is injured beyond the point of communication, which I think has been pretty much like explicitly implied. I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but like there has been no mention of collaboration with Verity at all. She is writing this series based off of Verity's notes. Obviously, she's been incapacitated beyond the point of writing, but it's very clear, at least to me, that she's also been injured beyond the point of communication. However, Lowen is adult, so we have to give her some grace. On this drive, Lowen is also worried about money. Having moved out of her old apartment without the new one being ready, she says she's kind of homeless. She gets to the house and she goes into this long description about how spooky it is, trying and failing to set a dark and mysterious mood. This book is very good at telling us things and very bad at showing us things, which is like the most basic complaint of all time, but you would understand if you had read this. Particularly with setting the tone, I don't feel it at all. This is meant to be a thriller. She's meant to be frightened in this big house, and Colleen Hoover is not capable of doing that. Even just with the fucking metaphor that she uses for the house. She says, my mom used to say, all houses have souls. And if that's true, this house has a soul as dark as it comes. What? Are you serious? Are you actually serious? You wrote that down and you thought, push it. She parks her rental car and she goes to get out of it when suddenly she sees in the corner of her eye a little face staring in at her. This is their one remaining child, the 5-year-old boy named Crew, who I already mentioned. What a name. Crew kind of greets her and then he runs inside and shuts the door behind him and she thinks, what a little asshole. As if a 5-year-old who is like living this isolated life in the middle of nowhere in Vermont with a wealthy family, the only child here, would know your hosting etiquette. Lowen, come on. Jeremy comes to let her in and he shows her around the house and she says, I'm not even sure if I'm going to stay the night. I thought that you were just saying that you were dead broke and homeless, and now you're playing with rejecting the offer to stay in this very nice house and do your cushy little job. How am I meant to maintain empathy for you? He brings her to the master bedroom, which is on the main floor, and he says, I hope it's not weird that I'm putting you in here, but all of us sleep upstairs now, and this is the closest room to Verity's office. Jeremy says, let's go upstairs. I want to introduce you to the nurse who takes care of Verity. Lowen thinks, oh my god, she's injured enough to need a nurse? All you know, maybe you don't know she's injured beyond the point of communication, even though I think that's pretty obvious. All you know is that she's injured beyond the point of writing. Of course she needs a nurse. What do you mean? He asks her what pen name she's going to write under so that he can introduce her as that to the nurse so she can maintain her privacy. She says, I had no idea. I haven't even thought about it. He's like, okay, well, what's the name of the street you grew up on? And so convenient, she says, oh, Laura Lane. He's like, okay, what's the name of your first pet? She's like, oh my god, Chase. A perfectly acceptable last name. So he's like, okay, your pen name's going to be Laura Chase. I get it. I get it. This is a story. I understand that these things are so convenient and they work perfectly because it's being written. It's all made up by Colleen Hoover. But I think that's fucking stupid. And also, like, it's not like that's pushing the story forward in any way. It's not necessary. It's just beyond believability. Me, what my pen name would be? Squamish Valley Mew would be my pen name. My partner, Finch Misty. I don't think this system would work for most people. And also that makes it seem like he's trying to get through her security questions to get into her fucking bank account. She's introduced to this nurse, April, whose first description is that she's older. That is the first thing said about her, which is trying to say she's not a threat. She also sees here the state that Verity is in, which is just about comatose. She's lying there on the bed. Her eyes are open. She's staring up at nothing. She seems unaware of the world around her. And Lowen is instantly afraid of Verity, which there's a lot to unpack there. Jeremy then shows her to Verity's office, which is massive and luxurious and covered corner to corner in papers and documents and books and things that she needs to sort through. So she settles into the desk chair and she thinks, wow, this chair is probably worth more than 1 month's rent. at my 2-bedroom New York City apartment. She's overwhelmed by this very unorganized space, so she goes to the bookshelf and she pulls down the second book in this series that she's supposed to be writing, just only intending to take a glance at it, as if this isn't step one, as if you don't need to be studying these books. No, Lowen thinks that the most important information is notes that Verity has taken on what she wants to do with the rest of the series. I think that's insanity. I think it's way more important to be faithful to what the readers already know and love. But Verity's writing is so good that she ends up reading for 3 hours without even realizing how much time has gone by. She really is compelled by Verity's works because Verity always writes from the perspective of the villains, which is something that will be brought up again and again and again, okay? Finally, she pulls herself away from this book and she starts going through the files on Verity's computer, but she can't find anything that is related to the newer books or the books that haven't been written, just things that have already been published. So instead, she starts digging through file folders and boxes. And again, it's all about books that have already been published until she finds something called So Be It, which she thinks might be a new book, a book yet to be done, a book that she's going to write, but is actually an autobiography. Her excuse reading this is that she needs to get all of the information she can get about this woman and the way her brain works if she's going to mimic her writing style. But really, she wants to read it because she saw Jeremy's name in there. This autobiography starts with an author's note where Verity talks about how she thinks that to write a true, honest autobiography, the writer has to be unafraid of turning her readers away. That when a reader walks away from an autobiography, they should have at best, an uncomfortable distaste for the author. And then in italics, it says, I will deliver. Which is exactly the way that Lowen would write it. I think Colleen Hoover has managed to sidestep around this complaint that I have, that besides the over-the-top, insane characterization of Verity in her narrative voice, these two women have the exact same, technical and structural quirks to their writing, because Lowen is writing this book because Verity thought that the two of them had similar writing styles. But I just think that Colleen Hoover was aware that she wasn't able to really differentiate their voices outside of this insane characterization. She's got that covered, but I'll get her next time. Chapter 1 of this memoir starts with a quote, my eye is twitching, from Charles Bukowski. So you know that this woman is going to be evil. It is almost comical how villainous she is in her narrative voice. The word that kept coming to my mind was vixen. She's presenting herself as a woman that only cares about sex, money, and herself. On this night that she met Jeremy, she had stolen a red dress and then crashed this party looking for a rich man to hook up with. She met Jeremy there. Let me just give you an example of how she writes so you can know what I'm talking about. It was a fuckable dress. The kind of dress a man can easily bypass when he wants between your legs. The mistake women make when they choose their clothes for events like the one I was at is that they don't think about them from the man's perspective. And then it goes on and on about how, a woman wants her boobs and butt to look good, but a man wants to be able to get his penis in her. There's also the line, he wasn't rich, and yet I still wanted to fuck him. I think she's really meant to be the antithesis to Lowen. She's confident, she's cool, she's uncaring, she is explicitly, ravenously sexual. They just have really basic sex. She's just really driven by sex. She meets Jeremy. She describes him as having a voice that sounds like his throat is coated in honey, which I understand what she's trying to say there, but that to me just brings up the image of gargly, phlegmy speaking. Jeremy takes her outside the party and they go into a limo and he's pretending that it's his limo, and then the driver comes back and they have to run away and they're giggling and then they're basically attached from the hip from then on out, until Jeremy found the one thing that he loved more than Verity. And that's how the first chapter of her autobiography ends. Then we go back to Lowen, who pulls herself away from this, realizes that it's 11 p.m. and she's hungry, so she goes out to the kitchen to eat. She runs into Jeremy and she asks him very casually, oh, how did you and Verity meet? And he confirms that that is the true story of how they met, and this isn't a piece of fiction with Jeremy's name as a placeholder. Then the two of them start talking about grief, and it all feels like a major exaggeration of something that Colleen Hoover has probably heard people who are grieving talk about, something that is real, which is falling back into old routines that you had when your loved one was alive and then realizing again and again that they're not there anymore. However, she takes it just one step too far here. She says that every morning Lowen would wake up and she would make breakfast for her mom and then set the table and realize, oh, she's actually dead. which also doesn't even make sense because her mom was very much bedbound at the end. And then with Jeremy, it almost feels even more egregious because I feel like there's just a very obvious way to make this more of a believable anecdote. He says he'll often find himself yelling out the names of his daughters so that they'll come down so he can show them something, and then realizing, oh my God, they're dead. This is what I'm saying. It's one step too far. I think it is just as impactful and more believable for him to say, I catch myself before I call out their names. But instead, he's fully calling out both of their names. I just think that's just a bit too much. Am I crazy? Am I wrong? It seems weird to me. Also, when he's opening up to her about his dead fucking daughters, she's thinking, I'm a little suspicious. I should be looking for signs that I should be wary of him, that I can't trust him. Who acts like this? Who is this suspicious of a man with dead daughters, an incapacitated wife who has welcomed you into his home? You're not suspicious for the reasons that you should be suspicious at the very least. The two of them go to bed, and when he leaves, he says, good night, Lo, as if the 3 hours that they have spent in each other's presence is enough to justify a nickname. But she's tickled by it, of course. The next chapter is Verity's autobiography, which fills me with dread for what's to come because I don't care about Verity's autobiography. I think all of the chapters of it are boring, one note, and way too long while saying nothing. All they're doing is hammering home her already established and very excessive and tropey personality, and then detailing dull, passionless sex scenes. And that really is it. In this chapter, they fuck a million times, and it's nothing. There's no interest, there's no tension, there's no chemistry. It's nothing. It's just nothing. Verity writes her first manuscript while Jeremy is away doing some grad school thing, I think, and then he comes back and he takes the manuscript from her and he locks himself in the bathroom and he's reading it while she's begging him not to, telling him that it's not ready, pleading with him to just leave it alone. He doesn't listen. And because he likes it, this is played as romantic, where I think this is a massive boundary violation and would absolutely make me question my relationship if it happened to me. I think that's cruel. I think it's a cruel thing to do, to take someone's unfinished work that they're not ready to show you, lock yourself in the bathroom, and read it against their wishes. But it's so good. He comes out of the bathroom, he immediately strips them both, starts fucking her, and then says, will you marry me? And then now they're fiancés. That is their proposal story. Then this chapter ends, thank God, and we go back to Lowen, which it's crazy that this book is making me feel relieved to be back with Lowen, who's horrible, and I fucking hate her. She's sitting there in Verity's office, looking out the window, trying to focus, but thinking about how fucking terrified she is of the disabled woman sitting in her wheelchair on the back porch in front of this window. Okay? Lowen tries to just get down to work and focus, and then she looks up, and Verity is staring right at her. Here's what I think is happening here. I don't think it's a contested fact that Colleen Hoover is mainly a romance writer. I think probably Colleen Hoover watches thriller movies and thinks that you can pull off a jump scare in a book by just describing what would happen in the scene of a movie without all of the other elements that make it make sense in the movie. Like, I can see Colleen Hoover thinking of this scene, thinking of Lowen looking down and then looking back up, and the scary disabled woman has now turned her head. And there's like a swell of music or something like that. That does not work in a book, okay? Like, we all know that. Books have many times before freaked me the fuck out. A jump scare is not ever going to be achieved in a book. Or if it is, it will be in a very different way than just describing what is better suited as a scene in a movie. It takes a hell of a lot more skill than that, and at the very least, it takes the setting of a tone, which this book has not done at all. So when it says, in italics, by the way, to really emphasize the fucking jump scare, Verity's staring right at me, all it gets from me is an eye roll. It does nothing for me. She's all spooked by the disabled woman, so she goes to get some water, but as she's leaving the office, she gets a phone call telling her she doesn't get this new apartment that she thought she had been approved for because she's been recently evicted. She hangs up the phone and she sees Jeremy standing there, having heard the entire conversation. What she says here is, I guess I can add mortified to the list of words that describe this day. Obviously, the tense there would be mortifying. You can't describe a day as mortified. Whatever. Jeremy says, that's not good news. You can stay here if you want. You can stay here as long as you want. It'll probably take you a long time to sort through Verity's stuff. She thinks, well, I guess I have to, but I don't want to stay in this house with that woman. She gives me the fucking heebie-jeebies. No reason for this. So much ableism just inherent in these beliefs she has that I know is going to end up making sense with what happens in the book. I hate it. There is a long history of the disabled body being used as a point of horror in fiction, and this is just mindlessly following in that tradition. And it's tired, and it's ridiculous, and I hate it, and it's all going to be validated in the end. Sure, Lowen is not meant to be a perfect, flawless heroine, but her beliefs and her feelings about a lot of the things that I'm having problems with are never questioned or challenged. That evening, she's sitting on the back porch watching Crew and Jeremy do some yard work. Jeremy's shirtless. She's thirsting after him. The nurse comes out and says, "Hey, I left Verity upstairs with the TV on. She's taken her meds." Lowen's like, "I don't really know why this is important information for you to give me. Like, I'm not really in charge here, but whatever." She looks up and she sees that Crew is waving at her. She waves back and then she realizes, actually, Crew is looking above my head at the window to Verity's room. She stands up so quickly, the fucking drama. She knocks her water bottle all over the book that she's reading that doesn't even belong to her. She just took it from Verity's office. And she goes to look in the window. And what does she see? But the curtain moving a little bit. She's terrified. She creeps upstairs up to Verity's room, is relieved to see her lying in the bed, but still really creeped out by her. And then she notices that there's a fan in the room. And when it goes to the curtain, it moves the curtain a little bit. And she was just being dramatic. But then as she's leaving, she thinks, wait, the TV is off. While there are many explanations for why the TV might be off, and she does kind of cover them a little bit, thinks through them, it is clear that she still believes that Verity has somehow turned off this TV, or at least that this is some sort of evidence of something afoot. Crew is 5, by the way, not like 2. If it's trying to say that Verity is not as injured as she seems to be, and everyone knows this, including Crew, I think it has no understanding of like how intelligent children are, how much children talk, and how credible they are at 5 years old. Whatever, Lowen thinks that reading more from Verity's perspective will relax her, reassure her that this woman is nothing to fear, that she's literally just fucking disabled. There's no reason for her to be so jumpy. And she says here in italics, and that I need to chill the fuck out. That's Lowen's first F-bomb, and I know that felt like a big deal to write, and that's why she put it in italics like that. I'm already finding it really tiring that it's alternating between the autobiography and Lowen's chapters, and I think that it's making me hate it even more, that it feels the need to situate Lowen as picking up the autobiography before it ends her chapters and switches to the manuscript. I cannot imagine that for the next 200 pages of this book, it's not going to continue feeling very tired and overdone at the end of every single one of Lowen's pretty short chapters, her being like, and then I read more of the autobiography. I feel I should read a little bit more, maybe just one more chapter before bed. You do not need to do that. And if you're not going to continue doing that, it makes no sense to be so adamant that you do it for the first few times. It is already feeling so repetitive and forced, and this is 3 autobiography chapters into the book. I also keep thinking that the timeline with finishing this series is insane. A lot of the logistics of what's happening with Lowen's job here really feels a little bit holy. It feels like a fucking sieve, to be completely honest with you. Okay, her accident was like a few months ago, maybe 5 months ago. Verity has been back home from the rehabilitation center for like a couple of weeks. How are they not still very much adjusting to this new life that they're living here? How is the top priority hiring Lowen and getting her to come stay in this house, yet again changing the dynamics and the circumstances, especially for this fucking 5-year-old boy that should be the top priority here? How is that what needs to be happening and not a million other different things? It's not tracking for me. There are also some moments of really terrible phrasing that I want to pick on here. I would say that about 40% of the lines in this book are either straight up like grammatically incorrect or feel like the most awkward way to have possibly said something. Like, I'm craving to be alone in this room with Jeremy. That just seems really awkward, not quite right. I just made myself twice as nervous than when I left Manhattan. That one I think is fully incorrect. Or I look at the house behind him, wondering what that must be like for a child to grow up in such a home. I think that should say what it must be like. I'm also noticing a lot of redundancy within sentences, not just outside of sentences. Like I've already said, this book is so incredibly repetitive. Like, for example, I was offered this job because of our supposed similar writing styles, according to Verity's husband. Supposed and according to Verity's husband both mean the same thing. They're both doing the same thing in that sentence. They don't both need to be there. I am, on the whole, having the time of my fucking life reading this book. I think this is incredible. I feel like it is just flying by, and it is so incredibly bad on the technical, structural, organizational, ideological, sexual levels. It blows so hard. It's awesome. And it's driving me up the fucking wall. I am so excited to read the next 100 pages, and I will see you once I've done it. Hello, I am down 100 more pages with 100 left to go, and here to give you an update on Verity, possibly my favorite book of all time. Yesterday, my partner and I went to a cafe. We had a little vegan milkshake. It was exorbitantly expensive. They took me for all I was worth, and someone recognized the book that I was reading and commented on it, and I was humiliated. No one has ever commented on any book I've ever read in public until now. I'm reading Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, this person has perceived me as someone reading Verity by Colleen Hoover, and I didn't even get a chance to be like, I'm just reading it as a joke, because they were like, oh, the end is really good. Like, you're gonna be surprised. It's a shocking ending. Okay. Can never go back there again. So the next chapter is the goddamn fucking autobiography. This is Verity detailing her experience of being pregnant, which was not a fun one for her. One that she tried to end, partly because it was ruining her hot bod, but largely because Jeremy was focusing all of his love and attention on these unborn babies, and she wanted it on her. She didn't give a fuck about these babies. And she's meant to be someone who's like totally obsessed with him, will do anything to keep his attention focused solely on her and to make him feel the same way about her as she feels about him, including taking sleeping pills and drinking wine. And then later on, when he says that he's going to cry when the babies are born, and she thinks, oh my God, he's never cried for me, going the full wire hanger route, trying to induce, like, abort the babies in the fucking bathroom so that she can wake him up bleeding and he'll cry for her. The next chapter, Lowen is so shocked at what she's read. She's like, oh my God, I can't even, I'm not joking, literally. She says she knows now that Verity is telling the truth without a doubt in this autobiography because, according to her, no mother would compromise themselves as a mother by writing this if they hadn't ever felt it. Who knows what that means, but that is a conclusion that we're supposed to just accept. Like, what are you even talking about? Saying that fictionalizing this would compromise you as a mother? Thought crime in my Colleen Hoover book? Lowen is so freaked out by this chapter that she basically runs to the kitchen in search of a drink, but she can't find alcohol anywhere. Jeremy comes in and he's like, whoa, what the hell's wrong with you? She's like, I need a drink stat. He's like, okay, I'll pour you one, but like, tell me what's going on. She says, I read one of your wife's books and it really scared me. And he's like, wow, do you often get this affected by reading a book? And she's like, yeah, like even my own books do it to me sometimes, which she admits in like the narration is a lie, but you have to just think that's such a fucking funny thing to say. Imagine someone told you that their own books scared them to the point of near tears, like literally shaking. Baby, your imagination is that strong? Like, just stop thinking. In this conversation, Lowen asks him if there's any chance that Verity, who she's certain is evil, will make a full recovery, and he says after the medically induced coma, they thought that she might regain some function, but it's been long enough that they know now she'll probably be like this forever. And then Crew appears, and Lowen thinks, well, it's kind of a good thing that Verity's in this state, because she's obviously a monster and the worst mother in the world, and Crew really just needs his father, who, as she says, isn't afraid to show him affection because he just kissed the side of Crew's head. Again, this is that weird thing when she said he was like, he's not going to be vindictive. And it's like, who's talking about being vindictive? Also, I don't think because makes sense in this sentence to connect these two clauses. Am I crazy? Am I being a dickhead English major? I feel like this is phrased really awkwardly. And Jeremy isn't afraid to show him affection because he just kissed the side of Crew's head. That's not quite right. Jeremy takes Crew to bed and Lowen starts looking at the family photos on the wall. And I'm going to read you this entire paragraph so you know that you're not missing any vital context, okay? I walk out of the kitchen, but my eye is drawn to several family photos that hang on the hallway wall. I pause to look at them. Most of them are of the kids, but a few of them have Verity and Jeremy in them. They bear a striking resemblance to their mother, while Crew takes after Jeremy. What? This is nonsense. Something has obviously been deleted in the editing process here, because they clearly, is supposed to refer to the twins, but they have not been established as the subject. It makes no sense. This is bad editing. This is bad writing. This is bad proofreading. This book is just bad every step of the way. She notices here that one of the twins has a scar on her cheek and the other one doesn't smile very much. She looks at baby photos and she's like, wow, the scar's still there. That must mean that she got it at a young age. Thank you so much, because I really don't think I would have been able to figure that out without you. Jeremy comes back and he tells her that the scarred one is Chasten and that she got that scar in utero. And Lowen's like, oh my God, that must have been from the coat hanger. And can I say, I think it's really fucking crass for Colleen Hoover to have included this coat hanger scene in this book in the way that she did. This symbol of like desperation for women without safe access to abortion, when that is not at all Verity's like motivations or her situation. It feels really insensitive and almost mildly anti-choice. I'm not going to fully accuse her of that or say that that was her intention with this, but I do think it's kind of giving those vibes. Lowen then out of the blue asks if both of the twins had the same allergy, the one that killed Chasten, and she's like, shit, I shouldn't have said that. Not because it's incredibly insensitive and unrelated really to the conversation, but because it reveals that she has been Googling his children. He doesn't say anything about it. He just looks mildly disappointed, and he tells her that no, it was just Chasten who had the peanut allergy. Then he grabs her hand and he traces the scar that she has on her palm, and he says, where'd you get this? And she goes, I don't remember. Sorry, I need to go to bed. Good night. She goes back into the room and she notices that a lock has been installed on the door, which is something that she asked about that first night. And she thinks, I really hope that he doesn't think that I wanted the lock because I'm scared of this house or scared of him. And I hope he knows that it's because I'm protecting them from me. Because of my sleepwalking episodes that my mom was so worried about that she installed locks on my door when I was a child. And she's thinking about that mysterious thing that happened when she was 10 that we still don't quite know about yet. And she thinks, while I'm almost certain that I locked it before I fell asleep all those years ago, it doesn't explain why I woke up the next morning with a broken wrist and covered in blood. Again, a sentence that doesn't quite make sense. The next chapter starts with Lowen saying that she couldn't bear to read another page of Verity's manuscript, and I truly felt a wave of relief wash over me. I could not give less of a fuck about this manuscript. Oh my God. Who cares? It's just sex, and it's just the most boring, plain, annoying sex that you've ever read about from a woman who's supposed to be like really hypersexual and like obsessed with her husband, but it's in the most basic, nothing ways where she has really no solid motivations. I just don't care. I don't care. That morning, there's a different nurse taking care of Verity, and the first descriptor used for this nurse as well is that she's old, which is kind of just confirming what I said before about the only thing being important about the nurses is that they're not a threat to Jeremy and Lowen's burgeoning relationship. Also, Lowen uses the word invalid here to refer to Verity, which we all know is incredibly derogatory and extremely offensive, and also really not that surprising in this book. That day, Jeremy's like, hey, do you need anything from Target? I'm going to go get some groceries. You can just make me a list and I'll pick stuff up for you. And she's like, well, I do need things from Target, but what I need really is tampons. And I can't have him buying tampons for me. So she goes with him to Target. And then in Target, it lingers for multiple paragraphs about the tampons. She can't stop thinking about the tampons, how she's embarrassed, just like a lot on these tampons. It's a really big deal. And then she thinks, I shouldn't be embarrassed about getting tampons. Jeremy is definitely the kind of husband who picked up tampons for Verity at least a couple times. This is the first example of what will come up a couple more times, which is the bar being in fucking hell for Jeremy being a good husband or a good father. Lowen is in the trenches. In Target, they run into some of Verity's friends who are like the most stereotypical catty bitch characters of all time. I don't know. I'm starting to actually notice a pattern when it comes to how the women other than Lowen are portrayed in this book. Even the nurse is shown to be like cold and rude towards Lowen. It's interesting. It's tired. Ugh. I'm mostly bringing up these women because Jeremy snaps back at them by saying, tell your husband Sherman that I said hi. And she goes, wait, the bitchiest one. She goes, wait, my husband's name is William. And he's like, oh, sorry, I meant William. And then they walk away. And he says, yeah, Sherman's the guy that she's fucking behind her husband's back. And then Lowen says, I don't know if I've ever witnessed an epic burn like that in person. This came out in 2018. I need you to know this came out in 2018. She says epic burn. Then like 2 lines later, she uses the word epic again. The line was so bad. It had me like almost blushing. Like, I was embarrassed to be reading this book in like kind of a giddy kind of way. This epic burn has cemented for Lowen that she is falling for Jeremy, a man who she says is both unavailable and has more baggage than her. Though these people are in their like 30s and 40s, I don't think that it's all that difficult to find someone with more baggage than Lowen, who seems to really just have like a history of sleepwalking and a complicated relationship with her mom who has died recently. Not saying that that isn't huge. Of course it is. But like, you've lived for 30 years. I think you'll find lots of people who have had similar or worse experiences that have left them with a lot of baggage. I don't know. I don't think that Lowen is complex enough or has more than like really 2 points in her backstory to justify her saying that she has so much baggage. She's found a man with more than her. It's just like, that's not reflecting the character in the book. Later that day, or maybe the next day, who fucking cares at this point? She's pretending that she's working in the office, but really she's staring out the window at Jeremy, and he catches her staring, and she's like, oh my god, my heart is racing so fast. I need to go take a Xanax. She goes looking for her pills when she hears a scream from Crew coming from upstairs in Verity's room. She rushes in even though she's terrified of Verity, which, to be so clear, could be supported by what she's reading in the manuscript, but it doesn't actually really seem rooted in that. It seems like it's still just continuing to be about her physical state. Disability is horror in this book for the people who have to bear witness to it, not the ones who experience it. In Verity's room, Crew is on the floor, holding his bleeding chin with a knife on the floor beside him. She scoops him up. She takes him into the bathroom. I don't know what this is meant to be. I don't know what, like, it's all in italics, so of course it's supposed to be like a shocking moment, but I think that truly just boils down to like, knife equals scary. The knife is a symbol of violence. Like, is there meant to be an implication that Verity isn't actually in the state that she's pretending to be in and that she did this to Crew? Why would she nick him with a knife? It doesn't make any sense. It really is just, oh my god, there's a knife. Crew tells Lowen that mommy says not to touch her knives, but then won't say anything else. Jeremy heard the scream. He rushes into the bathroom. He's helping clean up the very small wound, and he tells Lowen, you gotta go get the knife out of the room. Lowen goes into the room, and there's no knife. In italics, she can't find it anywhere. She's sure that she saw it, but maybe this house is making her see things. That is not built upon at all, at least not in the 70 pages following this. No more of that. That could have been really interesting. Things are maybe happening in this house. Maybe it's something skewing with Lowen's perception. No. It's just one throwaway line. Maybe this house is making me see things. That's it. Never again questions her sanity. Completely dropped. The chapter ends, unfortunately, with a very convoluted and ham-fisted attempt to situate Lowen as reading the next chapter of the autobiography. Here, Verity has given birth to the babies, despite her attempts to abort or miscarry them, and she feels no love or tenderness or affection towards these babies, unlike her husband, who is such a good husband, loves them so much, he might even help change their diapers. Hello? She refuses to breastfeed because she wants to maintain her boobs, which is framed as something that is very evil and selfish, but like, what fucking ever. If you want to keep your perky naturals, I think you should be allowed to do that without being a fucking villain. It's not inherently evil. Okay, that's all I'm saying. She hates her children just as much as she expected to, and her husband loves them more than she ever thought was possible, even saying, have you ever loved anything this much? Which makes her irate because she thinks, yes, I've loved you this much. Then we go back to Lowen, who is also irate, but at reading Verity's account of like the moments after childbirth. Lowen is hoping that maybe she just doesn't understand because she's not a mother. She thinks it's probably similar to when a mother claims she doesn't have a favorite child, but they probably do. Ignoring the use of probably twice in one sentence, because if there's one thing this book is going to do, it's going to repeat a word twice in one sentence. What is that with the singular mother and then the plural they? I don't think this is Colleen Hoover having a woke moment. I think that this is yet another sentence that has been edited and hasn't made sense and no one caught it. Lowen here is again thinking about how good of a dad Jeremy is and how she keeps losing sight of the fact that he is trying to navigate grief while dealing with Verity and being there for Crew, which is a framing that really makes it clear how this book thinks about disability and caretaking. Then for some godforsaken reason, she decides to just take a box of family photos out to the dining room table, as if that isn't incredibly insensitive to a family who is still in the first few months of grieving the loss of both of their 8-year-old daughters. Jeremy comes over and he isn't like, hey, what the fuck do you think you're doing? You're here to write the book, you fucking freak. Put these photos of my family away. Instead, he starts telling her about his daughters, about how Harper, when she was 3, was diagnosed with Asperger's, which was retired from the DSM 5 years before this book came out. But you know what? I'm sure Colleen Hoover is going to handle that with a careful, delicate, sensitive touch. Jeremy tells her that his world ended when his daughters died, but when he got the call about Verity's car accident, all he could feel was angry. Angry at Verity, which Lowen does not question and he does not expand upon at all. At least not for the next, 40 pages? We're almost at the end of this book. Then they have an intimate moment, the first of many, where they get really close to each other. They're kind of hugging, kind of rubbing their bodies up against each other, getting really close to kissing before they're interrupted. This time by Crew, who comes down the stairs, sees the photos of his dead fucking sisters spread out on the table, and starts freaking out. He starts screaming and crying and throwing the photos back in the box. Jeremy takes him upstairs to calm him down, and Lowen is standing there like, what the hell was that? That was really weird. As if that's not a pretty normal way for a confused, grieving 5-year-old to act. As if it's something indicative of something sinister. So stupid. The next chapter starts with her saying that there's an unsettling energy in the house. Again, just outright telling us things and never showing them. She says about the energy, I'm sure it's mostly in my head, but that doesn't put me at ease, because the things lurking around inside the mind can be just as dangerous as tangible threats. And to be fair to Colleen Hoover, I was anticipating a lot more lines as fucking ridiculous and cheesy as that one in this book. Instead, what I'm getting is grammatically incorrect, badly edited, badly written lines. I'm kind of missing the corniness that I was hoping to get out of this book, to be honest with you. I think that would have been more fun. Instead, it's just annoying to read this. I feel like I'm the proofreader as I'm marking up this book. This chapter honestly doesn't have all that much of note in it. Crew says that he found a turtle and that he used to have a turtle, but he killed it. And she goes, oh my God, you killed it? What did you do to it? And he says, oh, I lost it in the house and then we found it dead under the couch. And she's like, whoa. For a second, I thought he meant that he killed it intentionally, which of course obviously that's what you thought. Why does it need to tell us everything like this? We know. Colleen Hoover, your readers are both not as stupid as you think they are and way freakier than you think they are. Jeremy then comes in the house, his eyes full of thoughts, and invites her to dinner with him and Crew. She's like, I know this isn't a date, but it kind of feels like a date. She dresses up as though it's a date. They have a great time. They get home. They have another almost kiss moment interrupted by Crew. And then she's like, okay, I'll see you later. I got to go goon to this manuscript. And then that next chapter, which she's kind of reading with the intention of jerking off to, or at least fantasizing about, is really just about how when Jeremy went back to work after the babies were born, Verity spent all day neglecting the fuck out of them. She would just leave them in their crib for the entire workday, letting them scream and cry while she wrote. And then right before Jeremy got home, she would go and pick them up and bathe them and change their diapers and feed them. It's insane child abuse. She's crawled into bed with her hand in her pants, and then this is what she reads. Though Lowen does kind of get what she wants here, because there can't be a chapter of this autobiography without some sort of sex scene. It's always the same sex scene, just not even really rephrased. I think she's just copy-pasting them. And then Verity ends the chapter off by saying, the girls might have taken a lot from us by then, but his desire was the one thing I knew would always be mine. Which I know the implication is not intended there, but also reading that you think, yeah, I would hope that your infant daughters didn't take your husband's sexual desire. I really hope they wouldn't be the focus of that. Why would she write that? I know why. I know the reason is because fucking Lowen and Jeremy are going to start doing their thing. But it's questionable. It's, again, not the intention. Just how did no one catch that, you know? Back with Lowen, she's like, well, now I'm sure of it. Verity is a psychopath. Then Jeremy interrupts her and he asks for help bringing an aquarium up from the basement because it's impossible to come up the stairs with your hands full or you can't open the door to get out. That is yet another sentence that doesn't quite make sense. Another sentence that obviously got changed during one of the revisions and then didn't mean anything in its new form. This is just a random guess, but what I think happened is that this originally said, you can't come up the stairs with your hands full, or you can't open the door to get out, which makes sense, but is poorly phrased with can't in there twice like that. I think they changed that, and then the sentence no longer worked. It's impossible to come up the stairs with your hands full, or you can't open the door to get out. Or, not the right word there. They're bringing the aquarium up because Jeremy has decided to get another turtle for Crew. And he says, Crew's 5 now. Hopefully he's old enough to remember to feed it this time. Which is insanity. You're saying that you had a 4-year-old that you entrusted with the sole responsibility of feeding an animal. I know there are some 4-year-olds that might be capable of that. Not this one, though. They go down to the basement, and it's not as nice as the rest of the house. Like a neglected child is the metaphor used here. Are you kidding? Is this a joke? Am I being punked right now? This is so incredibly direct, it's ridiculous. She says normally she'd be afraid to go into a dark basement like this, but this is the only room in the house that she hasn't seen yet. I don't even think that's true. She's been here a couple days. I don't think that she has seen the daughter's rooms. I don't think she's been in, like, the upstairs bathroom. It's a big house. Like, you spent paragraphs describing how big this house was when you first got here. Feels like there are probably other rooms that you haven't seen. There's more hand-holding and obviousness in this chapter, but we're all tired, aren't we? Aren't we exhausted? It doesn't trust us to understand the most clearly laid out things, to remember things that happened literally like 2 pages before. It's as though she was anticipating the TikTok decimated attention spans that everybody has nowadays. She goes to bed after helping him, and she's like, well, I don't really want to wear any of my own shirts, as though that is a reasonable excuse to dig through his clothing, which for some reason is still stored in this room, and then put on one of his t-shirts to wear while she humps a pillow pretending that it's him. And then she lies in bed very still, pretending that she's Verity with her arms at her sides staring up at the ceiling, and she falls asleep. And when she wakes up, her wish has come true. She is in Verity's bed. She jumps out of bed, but she can't help herself from screaming when she sees that Verity was in the bed with her. Jeremy rushes into the room, and the two of them finally have a heart-to-heart about Lowen's deepest, darkest secret, her sleepwalking. When she was 10, she broke her wrist during a sleepwalking episode where she escaped her locked bedroom and then stood on the porch railing and then jumped off of it. There were security cameras in her house, and they caught her on the railing, and what was so scary was this video of her standing on the railing balancing for over an hour, because no one in the world should be able to balance for that long. Maybe I'm just better than her, but I think I could balance for that long. I don't think her knees are that shot at 32. I'm not going to subscribe to the belief that 32 is like past your prime. I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal to stand on a porch railing for an hour. I just think I could do that. Anyway, it does seem like her big giant secret was really just that she sleepwalks, and it's kind of scary. I'm not sure what she's extrapolated from that makes her believe that she could be a threat to others. Maybe there will be more to come out of this. I'm willing to accept that if it happens, but I think my prediction is going to come true, that this is a fucking nothing burger. I'll say I was a sleepwalker as a kid, and it was absolutely scary. But what's scary is waking up somewhere and not knowing how you got there. In those moments where you're very confused and also like half in and out of sleep, it's like really uncomfortable and can be very frightening. That is not any part of Lowen's experience with her terrifying sleepwalking. What she's scared of is what she might be capable of, and I think that has more to do with her mother's reaction, which was like putting locks on her own bedroom door, which is insane. This is your 10-year-old daughter. What the fuck do you think she's going to do while she's sleepwalking? I don't know. It doesn't feel that serious. And they treat it with such intense gravity. Like, Lowen, as a 10-year-old, is given sleeping pills, which, first of all, I don't think is a first-line treatment for sleepwalking. I think actually maybe can make sleepwalking worse unless you're fully fucking tranquilizing her. But also, a 10-year-old is not going to be given sleeping pills. Certainly not to treat sleepwalking. Jeremy ends up saying that her mother treated her horribly and that must have really affected her, and then he takes her to the bed and he crawls into bed with her and he stays in there with her until he thinks she's fallen asleep, and then he like kisses her head while he thinks she's sleeping. The next morning, she's in the kitchen on her second cup of coffee because she never fell back asleep the night before when she sees the nurse pull into the driveway, and she thinks, I really don't want to be here when she comes in because all the women in this story other than me are fucking bitches. So she goes back to what she calls her office, which is absolutely deliberate and I think could be interesting. She doesn't even register that she has called it my office. She's ingraining herself into these people's lives. This could be something. Is it going to be? I highly doubt it. The wisp of it is there, though. On the way back to her office, she sees Jeremy, who looks exhausted, but she thinks, well, it's my fault he's so tired, so I can't really judge him. Why she would judge him in the first place for looking tired? Unclear. That evening, she smells him cooking tacos, which she told him was her favorite meal, and she thinks, even though it's really sweet of him to be making my favorite meal for me, I just don't feel comfortable eating at the dinner table when the nurse has Verity down there. I sound like a broken record. I'm tired of this. I'm exhausted by this. I think it's so frustrating that she could be off-put by Verity solely because of what she's reading in this woman's horrible autobiography. But a lot of her feelings are rooted in Verity's physical state. And she is continuously validated in those feelings, and I know by the end is going to be even more validated in the feelings of fear about Verity and her disabled body. Ugh. At the end of this chapter, there is, would you believe it, yet another incredibly convoluted and forced segue into the next autobiography chapter, where Verity talks about a dream that she has about the babies, where Harper suffocates Chasten with a pillow. She has hated the babies up until this point. She wakes up from this dream and all of a sudden, she is obsessed with Chasten, like the same way she was obsessed with Jeremy, and she fucking hates Harper. To the point that the next time she hears them crying, she goes into the room and picks up Chasten, who's not the one crying, while Harper screams in her crib. Then she puts Chasten down after a quick little cuddle full of maternal instincts, and she tries to literally kill Harper by shoving her fingers down the baby's throat. Because she's certain that the dream she had is going to come to fruition, and she needs to protect Chasten at any cost, including killing the other baby, which she fully would have done if Jeremy didn't interrupt her. He doesn't notice that she's trying to kill the baby, but it is a close call, and she realizes it's even closer than she thought when she remembers that there is a video monitor pointing directly at the cribs, but it was unplugged. When we go back to Lowen, she's reacting to what she just read by doubling over and clutching her stomach, which is like a little dramatic. She flips through the next few chapters and sees that there is almost no mention of Harper or the twins at all. It becomes just Chasten for like years. Chasten's first birthday. Chasten's first time staying at Jeremy's parents' place. It's incredibly strange. Jeremy comes and interrupts Lowen's work. Let's be honest, she's not doing anything that she needs to be doing to fulfill this fucking contract. He says, you need a break from all this work reading my wife's autobiography, even though it has nothing to do with the series that you're meant to be finishing. Come out into the yard with me and let's eat some tacos. The two of them have a dreadfully boring conversation that is paced really horribly, which is something that even terrible authors often have somewhat of a grasp on. In this, they'll ask each other questions, and then the next line is the person answering. She never gives them pause, which makes you have to do it. It feels like a middle school play where they have memorized their lines, but there's no flow of conversation, or even really like understanding from either end that someone else is talking. Mostly this conversation is just like building towards the romance part of this book, trying to create some chemistry between them, or even just like a remotely tangible dynamic. They talk about how Jeremy only ever read Verity's first book because it was hard for him to believe that all of this came from her imagination. And Lowen's like, yeah, because it didn't come from her imagination. The villains she writes as are really like her, but she obviously doesn't say that out loud. Jeremy tells her that it was a problem that he didn't read Verity's books because she needed his validation despite getting it from millions of readers. And Lowen thinks, well, I think she even says it, actually. Well, validation would be really nice. I don't really get any validation because I'm not that successful and I don't put myself out there. But I would love for someone to tell me that my work meant something to them. And then the two of them agree for him to lock her in the bedroom at night so she can sleep, like, from the outside. For some reason, that's their solution to the sleepwalking thing, which, again, like, she is not a threat to anyone. Before he locks her in the room, he says, Lowen, I lied to you. Verity never read your books. I was the one who read them, and your work means something to me. And then the chapter ends. And then the chapter ends by him then locking her in the room and walking away, and she thinks, I'm in love with this man. What? So that's where I'm at. She will not stop bringing up how interesting it is to read Verity's books and see how she writes from the villain's perspective, even when it makes no sense to interject that into the text. And it just feels like such an explicitly clear setup that I think I would pick up on it even if I didn't already know what was going on in this book. Especially because she won't stop saying it's so interesting how she writes everyone as a villain and relating that to how Verity writes in her autobiography, but only ever one way. It could only ever be she's writing as villains because she is a villain, not that maybe she's writing in her autobiography to practice her writing. How poorly edited this is, how obviously it's in need of another revision, the inability to set any kind of tone, the stilted dialogue, the lack of characterization, the lack of nuance, the offensiveness. This is up there with one of the worst books that I have ever read. I'm having the time of my I'm having so much fun reading Verity by Colleen Hoover. Oh my god, I get it. I get why this book is, for some reason, so popular. I don't even care. Say what you will. I love this. This is awesome. I'm gonna go finish it up, and then we're gonna talk about it. I have done it. The best and worst experience of my life. The next chapter after I left you off was another goddamn autobiography chapter. In this one, Verity says that she was cooking chicken and dumplings, the 5th meal that she'd ever cooked in the Vermont house, and the only one that Jeremy had ever thrown at the wall. She had cooked this meal, his favorite meal, because she had sensed that he was a bit mad at her. She thought this was probably because she signed the girls up for daycare without running it by him first, because he went back to work and she could not handle even one day of taking care of them on her own. Jeremy didn't want the kids in daycare because of Chasten's peanut allergy. She writes that he was afraid the daycare would be careless, even though Chasten was the kid I actually liked, which are two completely unrelated clauses. But he only reveals what's actually making him angry over dinner when Verity starts talking about the things that Chasten learned in daycare that day, and Jeremy throws his plate at the wall and storms off into their bedroom. She follows him, and he tells her that he's noticed that she treats the girls differently, and that she only ever talks about Chasten and Chasten's achievements. She quickly makes up an excuse that Harper just has different needs, and then she says that they should get her assessed for Asperger's. This mostly works, but to pull him all the way back onto her side, she also tells him that she is pregnant with another baby, which is not the truth. They have sex because they have to have sex every single chapter, and he eats her out, and she thinks, yeah, of course you want to eat me out. I kept it intact for you down there, referencing her C-section, even though it's been 3 years since she gave birth. I don't think that that would really affect his experience of eating her out if she had done it vaginally. Like, I don't think that's going to change the taste. Am I ignorant? Jeremy is still being portrayed in Verity's autobiography as just this really good dad who's being abused and manipulated by Verity. But I would like to point out that throwing a plate of food at the wall is an insane escalation and likely indicative of more violence to come. I've heard that Colleen Hoover has a tendency to romanticize abuse, and I can absolutely see that here. Throwing a plate of food at the wall is an insane reaction, a very concerning reaction, and something that non-abusers don't typically do. Back with Lowen, she's bored with Verity's manuscript. If it's not disgusting her and making her physically react by how disturbing it is, it's just not that interesting. Also, she's pretty jealous of all of the sex that she calls detailed in here, even though I'm not finding it to be detailed sex scenes at all. It's not detailed in physical sensation, in action or behavior, or in the dynamic between them. It's literally just like, I gave him a blowjob. He ate me out. We made love to each other. His temple was inside my temple every single time. This chapter is one of the most obviously in need of a better proofread so far. Like with these 2 lines, I've been here almost 2 weeks now. Corey says they processed my advance and it should hit my account any day now. So incredibly choppy, so repetitive. And then on the next page here, virtually every sentence for the full page starts with I. It's so emotionless and staccato and dull. It is like really bad writing on the most basic of levels. I truly think that high schoolers in creative writing classes are doing better than this. You don't start every single sentence with I. It almost takes effort to be this bad. Lowen reveals to Jeremy that the next day is her 32nd birthday because he just so happens to ask how old she is. He then makes her a cake and ices it immediately, which drove me nuts. It has to cool, Jeremy. He brings the cake to her at midnight and he tells her to make a wish, and she thinks, the only thing in my life that I feel like I want right now that I don't have is him. I don't need to tell you that that phrasing is really fucking awkward. That's what I'm saying about every line that I read to you. It's all so bad. Just egregiously terrible phrasing. So clunky, so overwritten. He starts feeding her the cake, and then it finally happens. Now, it's Lowen and Jeremy who are having the passionless, dull, repetitive vanilla sex. Oh my god, it's so exciting. I care about these dry-ass characters so much. Desperately wanted Jeremy to be unfaithful to his bedridden wife. Oh my god, did I ever want the dumbest, most annoying narrator of all time to get what she wanted? I'm thrilled. When they first kiss, Lowen says, he kisses me with the hunger of a man who had been fasting his whole life, which is basically, he kisses me with the hunger of a man who's hungry. Okay, I lied. They don't actually start having sex yet. They get really close, and then over Jeremy's shoulder, who does Lowen see standing at the top of the stairs? Because yes, they are doing this in the living room. But Verity. She pushes Jeremy off, and she starts saying Verity over and over, but Verity has run off into the room with an angry look on her face and fists clenched at her side. Jeremy goes, oh my god, I'm so sorry. I should never have kissed you. And then, thank God, Lowen explains to us that he thinks she's feeling guilty because he's married. I never would have figured out that that's where his head was at. When she explains what happened, Jeremy's like, that's impossible, Lowen. I've seen her brain scans. They go upstairs, and of course, Verity is lying there in the bed. Lowen asks, do you think it's possible that she's faking her injuries? Which is a patently ridiculous thing to say. He just says, no, that's not possible. He doesn't say, what the fuck is wrong with you? He doesn't say, get out of my house. He doesn't say, you need to stop watching horror movies. He says, no, she's not faking her injuries. That's a normal question for you to ask. Can you imagine this? Like, actually imagine this. Imagine you have someone in your life who is borderline comatose after a devastating brain injury, and someone comes into your house after a few days is like, I think she's faking it. That is insanity. Lowen is like, he thinks he knows her well enough to know that she wouldn't do something like that. But if there's one thing I know that Jeremy doesn't, it's that he doesn't know Verity at all. Which is actually kind of two things that you know. You know that he doesn't know Verity, but then also another thing he doesn't know is that he doesn't know Verity. At this point, I really am just nitpicking at how terrible this book is on the sentence level. The next chapter, she says, I lay in bed for a while this morning, not wanting to leave the room. Jeremy left my bed sometime around 4 this morning. Why is it so repetitive with the word choice? Also, she cannot decide what tense she's writing in. This feels like a toddler's first draft. Jeremy comes to visit her in the office to tell her that he got a lock for Verity's door to, like, reassure her that Verity's not going to come attack them. That's bananas. Why are you entertaining her at all with this? I would be so extremely offended if I were in his shoes, and instead he's like, yeah, no, why don't I just, like, support her belief that my wife is faking her coma and also create a fire hazard that will kill her in any emergency. This chapter is just a couple of pages long because Lowen really wants to get to the end of the autobiography where she believes that Verity is going to detail what happened to Chasten and Harper. This is the most egregious example of Colleen Hoover feeling the need to situate Lowen as sitting down and starting to read the autobiography to segue us into the next chapter. This time she literally says, I don't think I'll be able to get through more than one chapter before I have to sit back and digest it. What are we talking about? What are we doing? You don't need to give us this step-by-step bullshit. It's so ridiculous. The next bit of the autobiography, she talks about how she got pregnant with Crew just a couple of weeks after lying about being pregnant, and that Crew was probably a good baby, but she wouldn't know because now she has enough money to hire a full-time nanny. Then she talks about the worst news of her life and what she was doing when she received the call that Chasten had died, which was washing her chicken. You don't need to wash chicken. I understand this is a thing that some people do, but I am here to tell you, stop washing your chicken. Any governmental food agency will also tell you that all it's doing is creating more risk. You do not need to be washing chicken. And for some reason in this scene, she's washing the chicken for like minutes and minutes on end. If you're doing that, you need to take a step back and you need to think about it, and then you need to stop doing it. I'm sorry. I'm on my high horse about washing chicken, but that was something that the internet showed me that other people did, and I still cannot believe it to this day. You don't need to wash your chicken. She did not need to be doing that. The entire drive to the hospital, Verity is wondering how Harper has managed to kill her sister. The story that they end up getting is that the parents of the friend they were sleeping over with had kept everything with Peanuts out of reach of the children, except they went to get snacks in the middle of the night, and they got some stuff with Peanuts, and they ate them, and then they woke up in the morning, and Chasten was dead because they hadn't realized that they were eating food with peanuts in it. And she's like, Harper fed this food to Chasten. But I want to kind of like nag on the fact that, what do you mean you woke up in the morning and Chasten was dead? I could be wrong about this. I'm willing to be wrong about this. Pretty sure that going into anaphylaxis makes noise. I'm pretty sure somebody would have noticed something. It's not like these children were like drunk out of their minds. They're 8. They would have heard something, right? That inconsistency, though, that's with Colleen, not with Harper's story. Verity doesn't use that to support her idea that Harper did something to her sister or gave her the peanuts and caused her to die. No. She just believes that because she had a dream about it. And also that dream has apparently prepared her for the death of her child, so she gets over it pretty quickly and is annoyed that it's taking so long for Jeremy to grieve. She's like, okay, let's pick up the pace. I want to get back to fucking. She's annoyed with how sad Jeremy is all the time, and she's thinking, damn, I wish I had killed Harper when she was still a toddler and then this would have never happened. As if Jeremy wouldn't have also had to grieve Harper. She's thinking, God, I should have just put her in the car with me and then not done up her seatbelt and turned off the airbag when she was 3 and then drove into a tree and killed her. But what? As if that wouldn't be incredibly suspicious to have a child not only not in the car seat in the back sitting in the front seat, but also with the airbags off, driving her into a tree. That makes no sense. And you're thinking, hey, maybe this is something you don't need to pick on. Maybe it's not supposed to make sense. Verity is obviously illogical. She wishes that she had killed a toddler. But when we get to the end of this book, you will understand why this is ham-fisted in here. We go back to Lowen, who decides to try and test Verity, making loud noises to see if she flinches. And then when she doesn't flinch, for some reason, that is evidence to support Lowen's theory, because she's not paralyzed. So if she isn't flinching, it's because she's trained herself not to flinch, because her body should still be flinching. Very obvious to me that Colleen Hoover, or maybe Lowen, maybe it's Lowen, I'm gonna give some grace, I'll blame Lowen, does not understand how varied a person's reaction to a brain injury can be, how varied the presentation of that is. I do think actually that Colleen Hoover is trying to portray Lowen as kind of out of her mind here, as unable or unwilling to accept anything other than the theory that she's already decided is true. But I kind of think this is a stupid character choice, because it's really annoying following Lowen, and kind of you're supposed to like Lowen, and then she is such an idiot. It's really, really hard to connect with this character is what I'm saying. She leaves the living room where Verity is, and she goes to the kitchen to make dinner for Crew and Jeremy, because she's not making dinner for Verity Crawford. She's not going to have her birthday dinner sitting beside this disgusting disabled woman. What the fuck? Then she thinks to herself, I can't hear the TV anymore. And now she's getting angry. So she stomps into the living room and dun dun dun, the TV is muted. She leans into Verity's face and she calls her names. She tells her she's the worst person in the world. She says, I'm gonna fuck your husband tonight. And Verity doesn't flinch. And she thinks, even though she has literally just convinced herself that Verity is able to override instinct, that if she was really in there and she heard these words, there would be some sort of reaction. As if that is harder than overriding your literal basic instincts of your body. As if just ignoring what she's saying would be so impossible. It makes no sense. Nothing in this book makes any sense. Lowen sits there waiting for her to do something, and then for whatever reason, all that ends up happening is that she pisses herself. And then Lowen calls Jeremy in to take the disgusting disabled woman away from her and clean her up. She does think to herself, even if those words didn't get to her, at least she knows I'm not afraid of her. Which is just untrue. That is absolutely untrue. That has not been the truth for this entire book. Even before you started reading the manuscript, you were afraid of her, and you absolutely still are. That night, Lowen tries to convince Jeremy to put his wife into a care home, and this conversation is treated as though it's the first time this has ever been brought up, as if that wouldn't have been brought up at the hospital or the rehabilitation center by professionals and social workers. This is her opening Jeremy's eyes to other possibilities. For some reason, Lowen says Verity will have more opportunity in a care home, but really she just wants to be able to fuck Verity's husband whenever she wants. Which they start doing immediately. Truly straight from your wife should be in a care home and you should put her away for good to take off your clothes, let's have sex. This is their first full-on penetration sexual encounter, and it is so nothing, just like every other sex scene in this book, even though it's been building up to this for the whole book. The book about the woman having sex with planes is 100,000 times more erotic than Verity by Colleen Hoover. They also keep calling it taking her. He says, I want to take you in every position. And she's like, I want him to take me however he wants. I don't know why. That just sends shivers down my spine. I hate it. I don't like that. They have a bunch more sex, and then they spend the night together accidentally. He meant to get up early in the morning before Crew woke up and go back to his own room. When they get up and he goes to leave, the door is locked from the outside. Immediately. Lowen is like, that was Verity. Verity did it. And if Verity did it, that means she has taken Crew, which she has no reason to believe. Because in Verity's manuscript, yes, sure, she's evil. But she's evil mostly because she hates her children. Why would she take Crew? So even though Lowen has no reason to say or believe this, as soon as it's out of her mouth, Jeremy is breaking the window because he is just such a good and protective father. He goes upstairs and Verity and Crew are both there just asleep in their beds. Like, none of what Lowen said was going to happen happened, and they never question their immediate belief in this. The next chapter is the autobiography. Verity is tired of her husband grieving and how his primary focus are his 2 remaining children. I don't even need to say anything about it anymore. I'm tired. That's the truth. I'm exhausted. How has this become so popular with such a fucking hack job of an edit? Verity is also really weirded out by Harper because Harper's autistic. Like, that is the reason. She's weirded out because Harper didn't cry after her sister's death. And for some reason she says, well, guilt can do that to a person, which I don't understand. Guilt can make a person not cry after their sister's death? She's again just thinking about how she wishes Harper were dead. She's extremely cruel to her. She makes her run upstairs crying because of how mean she is, just like in the tone of voice that she talks to her in. Then Jeremy comes in and he says, I'm going to the grocery store. You should take the kids to the lake. And then despite Verity's constant complaints about their dead bedroom, they're all of a sudden all over each other. She's whispering in his ear, I want you to sleep in our bed tonight. And he's saying, well, we're not going to sleep very much, are we? So like, she's got what she wanted. That was her main motivation. And yet for some reason, she's continuing to fantasize about how killing Harper or Harper's death would bring her husband closer to her. And also for some reason, how it would speed up his grieving process. That is the thing that's pushing him away from her. Like, I have no idea what she was thinking when she wrote this. I think it's been very well established that Verity hates Harper and thinks that Harper killed the daughter that she loved. I don't understand why that can't continue to be her motivation in fantasizing about Harper's death. Why it all of a sudden now has to be something to do with bringing Jeremy closer to her, even though that makes absolutely no sense. There's no logic, there's no reason. Like, her reasoning literally is, he has no room left for grief, so I might as well kill Harper. I don't know why her motivations can't continue to be centered in her idea that Harper killed Chasten, especially because her and Jeremy just planned their little rendezvous for that night, which is obviously not going to happen if their child dies within the next hour. The plot in this book is held together by Elmer's glue and a dream, and she's completely lost sight of it at this point. Verity takes Crew and Harper out in the canoe. She thinks about how he doesn't know it right now, but he might someday. Crew was conceived in this fucking canoe. Why he would ever know that, why he would ever know that, I have no idea. Also, she says that that's why his name's Crew. Ew. She takes them way out into the water and then whispers to Crew to hold his breath, and then she tips over the canoe. And she scoops him up, swims back to shore, and then realizes, fuck, I gotta at least pretend like I'm trying to save Harper or it's gonna look really suspicious. So she goes, she puts on the hysterics, she dives over and over again. Jeremy shows back up. Everyone's looking in the lake for Harper. He finds Harper. She sees the look on his face as he carries his dead daughter's body out of the lake, and she thinks, damn, I miscalculated. He's gonna have to grieve her, actually. Actually, this is probably gonna be harder than Chasten's death. Like, yeah, no one knows what made you think that in the first place. It turns out there was a lost fishing net right in the place where the boat overturned and Harper got tangled in it, which is a great excuse for Verity, who can say if she didn't get tangled in it, she could have swam to shore, even though they were very far out, and it was clear that Harper didn't know how to swim. Whatever. We go back to Lowen, who is gripping the toilet as she vomits, and I think it's a little dramatic. Yeah, for sure. Reading this would disturb you, but to the point of vomiting after finishing the chapter, it's a bit much, girl. She takes a Xanax and she goes to sleep, and then she wakes up with Jeremy on top of her. This is not assault in this book. This book has a lot of sleep sex, which is something that I find really gross and that I really don't like reading about, but that is treated as like romantic and sexy here. Even though Jeremy, oh my god, Lowen locked the door before going to sleep and Jeremy climbed in through the window and then started having sex with her while she was asleep. I don't understand how that is not assault. She's like, oh my god, this is so romantic. That is criminal. I think this is the most upsetting part of this book. He tells her that he checked and the door can lock on its own if you close it in the wrong way, and she doesn't respond because she thinks it's way more likely that Verity was the one that locked the door. I'm sorry. it's way more likely, there's a higher chance that this woman has been faking a coma for 6 months, somehow has done something that means that her muscles have not atrophied and she can still get around just fine. She knew that you two were having sex, came down, astronomical risk, locked the door. For what to what end? That's a higher chance than a little bit of malfunctioning that Jeremy has tested and is possible to happen. What are you talking about? Okay, then the two of them start like sweet talking. He's like, I like it when you wear my shirts. And she's like, I like it when your shirts smell like you. And he's like, well, what do I smell like? And she says, you smell like petrichor. And he's like, what the fuck is that? And she's like, that's the smell of fresh rain after a long period of warm weather. Okay, so now she's smart. Now she knows literally anything about the world that she lives in. Also, the way I told you that dialogue played out is exactly how the dialogue is in this book. It is so stilted. Lowen decides that telling Jeremy that his wife killed their daughter would only bring him more pain, so she keeps it to herself. Then he comes in her with no protection, leaves out the window, like crawls out the window to leave, and she lifts her pelvis up into the air to keep the semen inside of her. What the fuck? She says she does it so that everything he left inside of me doesn't seep out. Ew. Lowen goes back to sleep and she has a dream that Crew is a teenager and he's evil because of all he was put through by his mother. When she wakes up, she goes to hang out with Crew. He's playing Toy Blast on his iPad and she thinks, well, thank God it's not Fallout or Grand Theft Auto, which I don't think you can play either of those games on iPad. Lowen decides to start questioning this poor child about the death of his sister that he witnessed, about what happened while he's licking peanut butter off of a butter knife. He says, Mommy told me not to say anything to you about Harper. And she's like, does your mommy pretend she can't talk? And then he bites down on the butter knife so hard he ends up needing 6 stitches. Hello? He doesn't even cry. He just bites and bites and bites until he has a wound on his gum so bad he needs 6 stitches. What this really means is that Verity and Lowen are left alone in the house together while the boys go to the hospital. She locks Verity in her room and then goes to the basement to try to find this baby monitor that she had seen down there. A whole new line. It says, the baby monitor has been moved. As if that is indicative of something sinister. It's not. That means nothing. Jeremy is allowed to go into his basement and move stuff around, and that doesn't mean that evil is taking place in this house. Colleen Hoover knows what is going to be worthy of suspicion in hindsight, and she's including it all now before we've figured out what's going on, even though it's nonsense. And it's driving me up the wall. It's just over and over again, this narrator being an absolute idiot, being suspicious of things that she has no reason to be suspicious of, that have absolutely reasonable explanations, 100 reasonable explanations that would come before what she thinks has happened. And then in the end, it's all going to be tied up and she's going to be fucking right for no reason. Ugh. Lowen does find the monitor and she sets it up in the room pointing at Verity and then goes downstairs to keep an eye on the video while she reads the last chapter of the autobiography. Thank God, I'm so tired of the autobiography. In this chapter, Jeremy accuses her of having something to do with Harper's death because he knows that she told Crew to hold his breath before she tipped the canoe over. She thinks, this is the one situation I can't talk myself out of, because Jeremy is such a good dad, he loves his children so much, he would never believe me over the 5-year-old. So she writes that she's at the end of her story, that he's going to wake up the next morning convinced that she killed her daughter, and he's going to call the police. She writes, if that's the end, so be it. I'll drive my car into a tree. That's it. That's the last line. Sorry, I thought Verity Crawford was supposed to be like a really, really, really good writer that everybody knows, like the most impressive writer of all time, and this is the last line of her autobiography? Okay. Before Lowen can process what she's read, Jeremy comes home with Crew, who is 6 stitches heavier and knocked out on pain meds. She notices that Jeremy's covered in blood and she thinks, wow, it's starting to become our thing, in like a darkly humorous kind of way, but this confused me. She's referencing the first chapter of the book with the guy whose head fucking exploded under the car. That has not come up at all. That has not been significant in any way throughout this book. I had completely forgotten about it. And it is insane to have a scene that unnecessarily gory to start off your book and I've already forgotten about it. That's how terribly written this is. He goes to shower it off, and Lowen turns to the baby monitor, and she sees Verity on the floor on her hands and knees. She starts screaming bloody fucking murder, rushing upstairs, but Verity makes it back into bed, and Lowen is pulling on her, trying to pull her out of the bed. Jeremy comes into the room, and for whatever reason, he just silently picks Lowen up, carries her out of the room, and then throws her over his shoulder and takes her down the stairs before placing her on her bed. That is insanity. That reads like it's written by a man who like fantasizes about overpowering women. I thought it was so strange. These are two fully grown adults. Why is he picking her up and overpowering her like this? Throwing her over his shoulder like she's 3? It's really gross. I do not like that. Lowen finally convinces him that she isn't lying and she isn't going crazy by showing him the manuscript. He sees it and he says, "Where did you find that?" And then he goes upstairs to his room to read it. She's watching on the baby monitor. She hears some like crashing and banging, and then she sees him go into Verity's room and start screaming at her, saying, "I'm going to call the police if you don't wake up and tell me what's going on." Several seconds pass, and then Verity opens her eyes and sits up. It's so ridiculous. And like immediately she can speak just fine. It doesn't even say she cleared her throat. She's been pretending to be comatose for 6 months. The mental image of this scene is incredible to me. Like her just kind of like giving up on the whole fake coma thing. That's awesome. Verity says, "I can explain," but Jeremy doesn't give her a chance to before he starts choking her to death. Lowen rushes into the room. She says, "Wait, stop. Don't choke her to death. That's going to leave evidence. You're going to go to prison. What we should do instead is make it seem like an accident by making her vomit and then choke on her vomit, in the same way that she read in the manuscript Verity had tried to kill Harper as a baby." And they managed to do it just by him shoving his fingers down her throat. They make it seem really easy, but apparently this woman is not brain injured. She's like fully physically capable somehow, and you can just shove your fingers down someone's throat and then they just suffocate on their own vomit. She would turn her fucking head. I don't think it's as easy as they make it out to be. 1 page apart, both of them separately say, "It'll look like she aspirated in her sleep." And Verity is dead. The next chapter, 7 months later. Lowen, pregnant with Jeremy's child, which did gag me, I won't lie. They're moving out of the Vermont house with Crew to get away from the stares and judgment of people who can do the math on Lowen's pregnancy and Verity's death. As they're packing up their house, Crew says, "Oh wait, I gotta go get my pictures that are in my mom's floor." Lowen's like, "What the hell?" She follows him upstairs, finds a hidden compartment in the floorboards where there's a photo of the daughters, the knife, and a letter. Oh my god, the letter. This letter explains everything. Literally everything that you have learned throughout the course of this book is thrown away at the very end in this stupid fucking letter. Verity writes that she wanted Jeremy to understand that the manuscript that he had found, because he had read this before Lowen showed it to him, which I'll come back to. That was her practicing antagonistic journaling, which is basically exactly what it sounds like and something her editor told her to do. It's where you write as the villain, but you journal. Like you write events of your own life, the opposite of what you really felt about them. She felt like she had mastered the art of antagonistic journaling so well that she had turned all of her journals into this like cohesive narrative, this autobiography manuscript, so that she could help other writers to do antagonistic journaling and write better villains, which is so fucking ridiculous because this autobiography is truly nothing more than just a fake biography. It has nothing to do with like the art of antagonistic journaling. And she thought, "I'm going to help other people with this." I think this is because Colleen Hoover doesn't actually understand writing. I think she just says things. Verity says, "I never thought you would read this autobiography manuscript because you never read what I write. So why did you read it just days after Harper died?" Which is just way too information-y. You don't need to deliver that to me because obviously you wouldn't have written that in a letter to Jeremy. It's just Colleen Hoover being so obvious her presence as the author is there. She's just trying to give the audience information. It's annoying. There's no trust and ambiguity here. Verity explains that Harper's death, of course, was an accident, that she wrote these horrible things about her children dying to cope with their losses. Is the sole intention helping other writers, or is it to work through your grief over your daughter's deaths? She has said that there were journals that were then turned into a manuscript. I don't see basically any writer putting the gut-wrenching details of her daughter's deaths as though she was responsible for one of them into the manuscript over the journals. That doesn't make any sense to me. She put it into the manuscript that's meant to help other writers. I just don't buy it. But Jeremy finds the manuscript, and before Verity can get a word in, he is dragging her by the throat to the bedroom. The next thing she knows, she is bound and gagged in their car. I am not certain how the car accident plays out. Jeremy is like staging her death, staging her suicide, essentially. And she realizes this. She realizes, oh my God, the end of the manuscript, it's going to read like a suicide note if I really die by crashing my car into a tree. What happens here, though? Does Jeremy jump out of the car while it's careening towards the tree and then move her over to the driver's seat? Like, how could he have been certain that that would even be physically possible with the state of the car after the crash? This is also the thing that I said I was going to bring back up, where she talks about wishing that she killed Harper in a car crash. She says, oh my God, I basically gave him directions on how to kill me when I pretended that I was going to kill Harper in a car crash. That's why it made no sense. It doesn't make sense to do that to a toddler, but I guess, sure, you could do it to an adult woman. I still am not piecing it together how exactly he did this, though. The story is absolutely full of holes. The holiest part is not the sex scenes. It's next, where she talks about how she woke up in the hospital and then just like somehow managed to pretend to be in a coma. Totally glossed over. Even though earlier in the book, Jeremy said, I saw her brain scans. Now, how in the fuck did she pretend to do that? We're just meant to accept it. We're just meant to be like, yeah, okay. She just lied. That can't be too hard to just lie there. She says that she continued to pretend to be borderline comatose because she couldn't find the manuscript anywhere. And she thought that Jeremy would be able to use that against her if she was in a state where she could take Crew away from him, even though her editor could back her up on the antagonistic journaling thing. She could just explain what she's saying in this letter to the police. I don't think they're going to be like, actually, no, we're taking you in for killing your daughter. She's like a fucking wealthy white woman. That's not gonna happen. But we can't ask for logic here. Verity writes that she heard Lowen and Jeremy fucking and that she's so pissed off at him for cheating. How about when he tried to kill you? Like, twice. No, the cheating is the issue, actually. She then writes that as soon as she finds this manuscript, she's gonna escape with Crew, and one day she'll call him and tell him where to find the letter. Okay, here's what I don't understand. According to this, Jeremy read the manuscript before Lowen gave it to him. So why was it just then that he decided to strangle Verity? He says that it's because she killed his daughter, but he apparently already knew that, already knew everything in the manuscript. Is it really just because she faked her injuries? Then leave her, bro. It doesn't make a lick of sense. And we're still supposed to be just as in love with Jeremy as Lowen and Verity have been, which makes me feel icky. After reading this, Lowen is obviously freaking out because they killed Verity kind of for no reason. She's not really freaking out, though, about the attempted murder that happened twice with the guy she's now about to have a fucking baby with. She, for some reason, eats the letter and then chooses to keep it all to herself, swallowing it like she swallowed the letter. Incredible line, my favorite in the book. Because she can't even blame Jeremy for trying to kill his wife. It's just because he's a really good father. And that's it. That's the end of the book. Except it's not. Because for some reason, there has been a bonus chapter added to this book, which I hunted down online and I read for you. In this bonus chapter, their baby is now 3 months old, and Lowen has decided that even if Verity made it all up and the letter was true, Verity is still a monster because Lowen, who's now a mother, could never make up such horrible things about her child. She says the question of whether or not they should have killed Verity doesn't haunt her anymore because no matter what, Verity was a terrible mother. And then the next line is, Verity deserved to die, no matter how much it still haunts me. Girl, you just said that it doesn't haunt you anymore. A lot of this chapter is Lowen talking about how jealous Verity makes her and how competitive she feels with her, even though she's dead. This is all written as though everything in the manuscript is true. Like Colleen Hoover can't write Lowen without Verity being the antagonist in her life still, which is fine, except Verity is the antagonist in the exact same way that she would be if the letter at the end of the book never happened. In this chapter, Lowen is also really weirdly distrustful and suspicious of and disturbed by Crew, who, as far as I can tell, is just like a really normal grieving 5-year-old. She says, I can never fully trust him, which is crazy talk. They go to the beach with Crew and the baby, and they make sure to go when no one else is going to be there, because even though Verity has been cremated and there's no way to pin her death on Jeremy, They are paranoid to an extreme degree. They have completely isolated themselves in this new house where they live in North Carolina. So it's really unfortunate when they run into one of Verity's old friends, the woman from way earlier in the book that they ran into in the grocery store, who Jeremy dealt that epic burn to, Patricia. Patricia immediately does the math with the baby that's 3 months old and Verity's death, and she's feeling a little judgmental. She gives them a look. She walks away. Jeremy says, take the children to the car. I need to deal with this. And then he drowns her. Even though Lowen literally just said that there's no way to connect Verity's death to Jeremy, and like, cheating doesn't make you a murderer, for some reason to them, it's her or us. So he just kills her. They get home and they have some really intense sex, and then when they're done with that, Nova, the baby, is not in her crib. They say, Crew, where is your sister? He says, she was crying so loudly I couldn't hear my show, so I put her outside. They go outside and get her. And once again, Lowen's weirdly suspicious nature is validated by the narrative. Because look, Crew did do something dangerous. He's fucking 5. The entire bonus chapter is dumb as hell, and it doesn't really work as an appendage to the main story because it's written as though she doesn't expect you to have just finished the main story. Like, she'll say things like, I'm writing under my pen name, Laura Chase, or my mother died just right before I went and lived with Jeremy for the first time. Like, I know. I just read the book. I think it adds nothing to the original story except even more insane plot points. There are so many things that this book brings up as though they're going to be important, and then nothing ever comes of them. Lowen's mother's death and her strained relationship with her, which at the very least should have meant something in the bonus chapter where Lowen is now a mother herself. Lowen's sleepwalking had no significance whatsoever other than like what is meant to be a couple of creepy moments, and then it's dropped. The concept of chronics comes back up in passing 2 times and then once more in the bonus chapter. And that's it. There was no need to like create a name for that. Also, all the stuff with Verity faking her injury drove me nuts. Besides the fact that that is impossible. That is impossible for her to have done that. There are all these hints that she's faking her injury throughout the book. There is no why. Why would she mute the TV? Why would she turn off the TV? Why did she have the knife? Why did Crew get the knife? Why did she cut Crew? Is that what was supposed to have happened there? I'm still not sure. No reason for that. No motivation. It's just creepy moments. It's the attempt to set a tone and the inability to do so. Colleen Hoover doesn't know how to write a thriller, so you're just left with this absolutely ludicrous plot that is full of holes and nothing has any reason or logic. And then the characters fucking suck too, and not in a fun way where you enjoy disliking them. No, they're just nothing. Jeremy is so dull as the supposed love interest that 2 women are meant to be madly in love with. He has like nothing that interesting or good about him, and then Lowen is dumb as bricks. And then the twist being thrown in at the very end with this letter that reframes the story and explains everything away doesn't work because we have literally no other concept of who Verity is outside of this manuscript or what she was like. Jeremy does not act as her character witness. We don't know what kind of wife or mother or person she was from the perspective of others. It is a fundamentally flawed premise, wanting us to take this letter at face value after an entire book's worth of contradicting information. And I know that it's trying to be like, ooh, what do you believe? Do you think the manuscript was true, or do you think the letter was true? But you are not giving us 2 equally viable options with that. And that's because Colleen Hoover can't develop a character or write dialogue to save her life. Of course, Jeremy is never going to talk about his experience being married to Verity and what she was like as a person. First of all, because the dialogue's absolutely shit. And second of all, because it would threaten the relationship between Lowen and Jeremy, which I believe we're supposed to be rooting for. This makes even the worst thrillers I've ever read feel very good at setting a tone because of how profoundly it fails to. The tone setting here is truly, I'm afraid of being in this house, knives are scary, and the disabled body is scary. And that's another thing, is that ideologically, this book is really offensive. It has anti-choice sentiments. It is incredibly ableist in many different ways. It glamorizes abusive behaviors and relationships, and it also has really weird and regressive ideas about sex and fetish. I've given you a million examples of how bad the writing is here. It was abysmal, bad on the most basic level, and then also like conceptually. Was there an editor or a proofreader? I struggle to believe that this plot and this writing was greenlit by anyone, and yet here I am holding it in my hands. There's absolutely nothing redeemable about this book other than the fact that it was a joy to hate, and I thank you for coming along with me on this journey and letting me be part of something that I missed out on a lot of years too late. Reading Verity by Colleen Hoover in 2025 is crazy work, but I had the time of my life. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.